Okay.
You hear me now?
Now I'm in.
Chuck, I think you had some Skype noise while you said that, so it sounded kind of cool.
Nice. So it's like, can you
Here's now.
hear me?
Yeah, it was
I
like
love it when
auto-tune.
Skype does that.
Okay, are we still goofing off, I'm guessing?
Yes.
Yeah.
Hey, everybody, and welcome to the JavaScript Jabber podcast. This is your host, Charles Max Wood, and this week on our panel, we have AJ O'Neill.
How's it going? I'm still here.
And Jameson Dance.
Hello.
And like I said, I'm Charles Max Wood from teachmetocode.com. We are having some scheduling and other logistical things going on, so it's just the three of us this week. We're still hoping to bring you the same great content. But yeah, if you have any suggestions, then by all means, go to the website, click the feedback link, and let us know what we can do for you. Because we really do want to make sure that we're providing the best content for you. This week we're going to be talking about Node.js. It's kind of a topic. I don't know if we've neglected it so much as just that we've had opportunities to bring guests on that were more expert in other related with V8 and not so related topics that have more to do with web development. So we thought this week we would jump in, talk about Node, talk about some of the ecosystem that's there, and see what we can get. One other thing is if you do have specific questions or suggestions for us, we also do have a Twitter account, and that is at JSJabber. So yeah, if you have questions about Node or questions about anything else that's related to these topics, that also helps us get a direction and really be able to provide what we need, or provide what you need anyway. So I'll quit rambling though, and we'll start talking about Node. So we know from our talk with Lars and Casper that it is basically the V8 JavaScript engine on the server, and I don't completely understand how that was done. Do you have any more enlightenment on that, guys?
So, as I understand it, Node is basically a thin C++ wrapper and then a bunch of JavaScript on top of that around V8 so that it can interface with server-side like system calls, basically. So networking, file system, all that stuff. So you can interact with your system in JavaScript, which is pretty awesome. So it's all event-driven, right? Because it's JavaScript. So it's all very async. You make your networking calls asynchronously and they all take callbacks. You interact with the file system asynchronously. So it all runs inside one process, and you don't have to deal with threading or deadlocks or any of the painful synchronization stuff, which is really hard to get right. I think the idea is that an event-driven model for doing server-side applications is easier to reason about in general, and it's harder to make crippling errors that will result in your code just exploding and deadlocking if you're doing stuff with threads. So lots of people compare it. Go ahead.
Does it not use threads then, or?
No, it's all in one process. I mean, you can do sub-processes, so you can like spawn off other processes from Node.
I'm going to contest there. First of all, I would not say that it's necessarily easier depending on what direction you're coming at it. And yes, there are threads, but it's a thread pool type system. So you don't see the threads. You don't write JavaScript threads. I think there is a web workers implementation, which is more like a literal thread, but it's basically in the C code, they spawn a thread or put something in the thread pool to do. And that's why if you PS and PSAUX grep node, you'll see there are 4 node processes running at a time. It's because it's your primary process and it's got a couple of threads going.
So you said 4 processes, but is it processes or threads?
It's threads, but in your process list, depending on how your process list manager is, like HTOP or whatever, maybe in PS you'll only see 1, but in HTOP you see 4. Anyway, there are multiple threads.
So basically what it does is it says, I have 4 threads, and so when I trigger another event, if there's a free thread to pick it up, then that'll be the one that handles it. Is that kind of how it works?
Yeah. So like let's think about this in terms of synchronous code, because down at the core, I mean, so this is called the reactor pattern. And there's a couple good tech talks and stuff on it you can find online if you Google reactor pattern. Douglas Crockford's Loopage really talks about it well. So say I want to copy a file, right? And I might want to do something else as well that doesn't have to wait. so that I put the file copy into a thread, and then when that thread's finished, it's gonna just mark a flag in the event system that says, hey, I'm ready to tell you what my result is. The event loop comes back around and it looks in its queue and it says, oh, look, here are some finished tasks. I'll go ahead and return the result for these tasks. And then if those tasks have anything else they need to do, then I'll put them back in the queue. Make sense?
Yep, makes sense. So, I blanked on what my question is. So
I have a question related to that. Is the queue, is it just a straight up queue? Is there any kind of priority? Will events get serviced in the order that they trigger?
So it's kind of a trick question. I don't specifically know how it is right now. I do know because me and one of my coworkers, we just had this fun project going where we were implementing Node's API in C. And so we used libev just like Node does, and we kind of got familiar with it. And you can kind of prioritize things with that library. Now they're transitioning over to a new library that they built with the help of Microsoft that is more cross-platform.
Which feels so weird to say, doesn't it?
Yeah, especially because the libev guy would probably shoot you for saying that his isn't cross-platform. That guy's pretty opinionated, actually. I mean,
it's lib of, right? Lib UV.
That's the new one.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah,
that's the new one that they partnered with Microsoft for.
Yeah.
Interesting. So one thing that comes to mind when we talk about Node is that the canonical, I don't want to say canonical, but basically the specification for JavaScript, be that ECMAScript, I think it's just that the ECMAScript standard. So Node does some things that JavaScript in the browser just doesn't do, like file access and things like that. So did they have to kind of add on to the standard in order to make it work?
Yeah. So I think it's important to consider the history of JavaScript server side. So let's step back to that for a minute.
I thought the history started and ended with Node.
No. At the same time that JavaScript was created for the browser, it was also created for the server. So in the Netscape server or whatever that was, actually was JavaScript. And then Microsoft, if you put a .js file on your desktop and you double click on it, it'll ask you if you'd like to run it with the VB script editor if you have that installed. So there's some sort of like Visual Basic plugin that runs JavaScript. It's part of, I think it's been there since Windows 95. And so if you create like an ActiveX object or whatever they call it, I've never actually done it, but I've seen some of the code. So it's got some sort of special module type system where you can create a file handler, but it's all synchronous. And then Rhino came out. Rhino has been used for some server side projects.
So can you explain a little bit more about what Rhino is?
So Rhino is just like Node,
animal.
except it's synchronous.
Isn't it a Mozilla thing?
Yeah. I think it comes from SpiderMonkey. I'm not real clear on that, but yeah, it is part of Netscape, Mozilla.
Very closely related animals, the rhino and the spider monkey.
Yeah, I would come up with that. They both have the same big horn, right?
Yeah, exactly. And so a little bit later on, have you heard of Jaxer? Or I forget, Aptana. They have this IDE. I think it's like Eclipse based.
Yeah.
Okay. So Aptana was doing a lot of cool stuff, getting a lot of press for a while. And they came up with this idea like, hey, we'll implement JavaScript client side and server side. And I was actually on a project where we were deciding what to go with, transferring a project that was done in Zool, which is the Firefox plugin language, the XML plugin language. And so that was one of the things we considered. We ended up going with Flash, which was probably a bad bet because, well, it's dying now. But
we should bring. It just occurred to me we should bring. There's a fellow out here. What's his name? Anyway, he's a Flash developer and he's trying to pick up Canvas and HTML. But he has a really interesting take on the transitions that are happening in that world and why people are moving away from Flash. And it's really interesting how much of it and how little of it has to do with Adobe. So that might be an interesting thing to talk about, just in the sense that people are making the transition now to HTML5 and Canvas and stuff. Anyway, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
It's fun to talk to him about it. Yeah, I know who you're talking about.
Yeah, I think his name's Brett.
Anyway,
okay. Anyway, so then there was Jaxer, and then so there was a lot of interest in this idea. It was kind of the seed that was planted in a lot of people's minds. And when Node.js hit, I was going to the Ruby group and some people were talking about it. And at first I thought they were saying Node.js and I didn't know what it was.
Like NoSQL.
But then people, yeah. And so like, but people kept on bringing it up. And so I thought, okay, I've got to take a look at this. And I think someone did a presentation on it. And then I was like, I'm hooked. And then I started, then two of us kind of simultaneously started up the JavaScript Utah group and all that. But anyway, so there was Ringo.js, I think was the name of another platform. So at the time that Node.js was really starting to form together, there was 3, maybe 4 competing products that were doing the same thing that were like, and I think a lot of it had to do with people like jQuery made JavaScript fun because people hated it for a long time. And if you haven't got a good education on it, you have every right to hate it because it's just as terrible as PHP if you don't have the discipline to help make it better or use it properly.
Right.
You know?
But you have to have a pretty good understanding of how the different constructs in the language work. And not only that, but a lot of them have some implications as to the way that you interact with them and the way that they work. And so, yeah, if you don't have a good handle on that, and we've talked about some of them like functions and closures and things like that, objects and the way the objects behave and prototypal inheritance.
Not even to start with the differences between browsers.
Right. Yeah, you've got the whole different VMs between browsers. But there's a lot there that, I mean, and it's not necessarily even the language's design. It's just that the ecosystem is so different from anything else that you're dealing with that, I mean, you have in Python and Ruby and a lot of these other languages, sure, you have other implementations on other VMs, but ultimately there's like one canonical version that the main guy behind it is has built, and everybody else.
The dictator.
Right. And so everybody else more or less just copies the API that this guy comes up with. And with JavaScript, it's not necessarily that way because each of the browser vendors has their own little agenda going on and they care about some features and not others. And so, you really wind up with this really interesting ecosystem with it, which for better or worse, it can get you into trouble.
And so CommonJS, which is the whole require system, that started more with like the Rhino group. But then like the Ringo people and the other people kind of picked it up. And CommonJS is like, well, how do we, instead of saying every time you include a file that everything's global, actually give things scope and
mouthwash.
Exactly. Cleaning it up, getting it fresh.
Yeah.
Right?
It's kind of funny. I was just trying to be a smart aleck, but it's actually pretty apt when you put it that way. Anyway.
Away with words.
So CommonJS, Node.js deviates from CommonJS a little bit, but in a way that really makes sense. Because I think there was some short-sightedness in CommonJS because for whatever insane reason, the CommonJS people never had the thought in their heads like, hey, we might want to create something that could be used in the browser as well. So there's some key features that were not really done right. And Node.js did deviate from the CommonJS standard in order to implement it correctly. The main thing there that they fixed being that you have access to the module, so you can export a function. In the CommonJS standard, you can't export a function. It has to be an object.
Right.
Can't be an array or anything like that. So Node is built on V8. It implements everything that V8 implements, but then it has all of these asynchronous APIs outstanding. But another kicker is from version 0.1, Node has had excellent documentation. And that's one of the things where a project either flies or dies based on how pretty that docs page is and how easy it is to grok.
Right.
Well, and not just documentation. I feel like the Node community has kind of sprung up fully formed almost. Like it feels, it's really young, but it feels really mature at the same time.
Well, go ahead.
I was just going to say, you have lots of really smart people who seem like they have lots of things figured out pretty well, which is cool. Like, I don't know, it doesn't feel like they're feeling around as much trying to find out the best way to do lots of things. It feels like there's lots of shared knowledge on best practices and stuff.
Well,
I hate the word. I said best practices. That gives me like the enterprise heebie-jeebies.
Well, there is and there isn't with best practices, and that's a topic for another show, I think. But JavaScript, especially with Node.js, again, I mean, it's this interesting ecosystem that we wind up with because, I mean, there are communities out there that have been using JavaScript for 20 or 30 years, and it's so they really just moved a lot of that interest in. And so there was a lot of mature knowledge about the language, even if there wasn't as much mature knowledge about the platform or whatever you want to call Node.js itself.
And you got to consider that largely people that have adopted Node.js, as far as I can tell, have not necessarily been the people that were using JavaScript, but the people that were using Ruby.
Yeah, it seems like there is a bit of movement that way.
Like before, I think it might have even before 0.3, when they were just getting to the second revision, they already had version control figured out. Like NPM basically took everything that Gem has, improved upon the weak points, and bam, it was there. And there's also like an RVM type thing for Node as well. But with the API moving so fast, up until 0.4 is where it really started to get stable. There wasn't much change in between 0.4 and 0.6, and it looks like 0.8 will stay about the same.
Are they using semantic versioning?
It's kind of Linux kernel style, where odd numbers are unstable and even numbers are stable.
Yeah, that's semantic versioning.
Yeah, and then the point releases are bug fixes.
Right. So you're not allowed to change the APIs on the bug fix releases, which are the third number if you're going point, 0.4.6, 0.4.7, that kind of thing.
Yeah, the rule they follow is that Ryan, well, I guess now it's Isaac, it's not considered to be stable until they hit 1.0.
Right.
But they're keeping the zero number there, even though people are using it in production. They're keeping the zero number there. So that, it's kind of a disclaimer. But it looks like, from what I can see, it looks like things have gotten really stable, and we might see a 1.0 soon. Yeah,
I've heard some pretty awesome stuff about 0.6 and just the stability and reliability, not just in, the VM doesn't crash, but in the stability of the API, and that, we really don't expect major changes here in the future.
Yeah, and there's a couple obvious bugs that as you use the API, you're like, oh, shouldn't this go there? And they've just a few little places where that's left, they're getting sorted out. So it's really stabilizing and coming together for sure.
Right. So let's talk about NPM for a minute, because I'm a little curious there. Some people may or may not have the background from Ruby where they're talking about Ruby gems. Or I think Perl has CPAN, or is that Python? Yep. Python has eggs.
No, that's Perl.
Eggs.
And I don't
easy
know.
Install and eggs is on Python. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think PIP is the Python. People are going to tell me I'm stupid. I think PIP is the canonical package manager now for Python.
Right.
Though.
So if you've worked with a language like that, you should be pretty familiar with what it does. But why don't we just go over it really quickly?
So NPM it stands for nothing. I was about to say it stands for Node Package Manager, but they specifically say it doesn't stand for anything.
That's a lie. That's just this is one of those things where they're like, we're going to confuse you. It totally stands for Node Package Manager.
They should have named it NOM, and then everyone could have said nom 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 or something. I don't know.
Nice.
Anyways, it's a program that lets you install Node packages by either specifying them explicitly or putting them in a package.json file, which is basically you list your dependencies, and then it does dependency resolution stuff. So it'll find the dependencies of your dependencies and do all that good stuff. It lets you publish packages to the NPM repository as well. So I know you said this isn't, we should explain it for people that aren't familiar, but it's really like Ruby gems and bundler kind of smushed together, right? So when you have your dependencies listed in this package.json file, if you just type npm install, NPM will search through that, pull all the dependencies and packages into a Node modules folder inside the folder that you called npm install from. So it installs these libraries locally, right? And then you can specify to install them globally across your whole machine, but by default, it automatically kind of sandboxes them, which has been a pain point in the past. So you can tell that was a problem somebody thought about and solved pretty well.
Yeah, it was a problem with Ruby gems for a long time before we had another tool called Bundler, which effectively does that. It just does a local install of your gems, which are your libraries.
But it feels like those problems are really related. The problem of installing stuff and figuring out local versus global and dependencies and stuff. So it's really nice that it's all in one tool.
Yeah,
and the latest version does not allow globals. The only way that you can do a global is if you're doing an executable. So if you want to install a system script with NPM, you can do that, but you cannot require globals anymore, which is good, I guess.
But you can still install, like, you can still pass it -G and install.
But it won't, you can't use it.
Yeah, so you can't, like, call require some global thing that I installed. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, so I mean, like, it's useless to install a module globally unless it is packaged with an executable.
Yeah.
Like, for example, less, the CSS compiler,
Right.
or CoffeeScript, the CoffeeScript compiler, like where it has an executable with it.
Okay, so then how do you make use of these packages, or whatever you would call them? Are they packages or libraries?
Whatever you want to call it.
So how do you make use of these packages?
Tiny chunks of code.
Yeah, code flex. We'll call them code flex. So how do you make use of flex of code in your golden application?
Well, you just speckle them in. Anyway, yeah, the way you go about it is I'm going to put this link in the show notes. But I've got a really simple how to get started with NPM as a developer. And I've got like 100 bajillion little 50-line snippets in NPM just because I like to reuse my code. Mm-hmm. And all you got to do is in an RC file, you set your name, your email, your blog, or whatever the web contact point. You run npm add user, so to add yourself to the system and set a password. Then you just cd into your project directory where the package.json is, and it has the dependencies listed, and you've got your lib and all that. And you do npm publish /, and then you go somewhere else and you do npm install name of package. And that's it. So nice. Really simple, super, super easy to contribute to NPM. Anybody can do it.
Yep.
And then were you asking about actually using the libraries that you've installed in your code, Chuck?
Yeah.
Oh.
So that's the require function. You call require, and then you pass it in a string that's the name of the library. And then that will return, if it's written right, it'll return some function or object or whatever. So everything that the library provides to you is all kind of namespaced inside that. It's kind of like the Python model, right? Where you require import foo as bar or something. So again, you can kind of tell that someone looked at Ruby the way that you call require something, and then it just kind of appears magically in the scope and was like, that could be done better. And it is really nice. You know that stuff isn't going to magically change. You aren't going to have objects or crazy class chains that'll just appear in global scope. It's all kind of encapsulated for you.
And there's some very important notes there. When you require, so when you npm install, it recursively installs. Let's say that you have a module that's used by two packages. So you've got module foo and bar, and both foo and bar depend on baz. What you're going to get is you're going to get two separate copies of baz. One is going to be in the subtree of foo, and the other is going to be in the subtree of bar. So depending on what you want, it may be best to include foo, bar, and baz all on the same level so that any internal voodoo that happens with baz will be a shared state that both foo and bar have. For example, instance of. Let's say you're passing an object around and you want to use instance of, which is probably an anti-pattern more than a pattern, just because it's so unreliable. And I found out this the hard way. But if you pass an object somehow from foo to bar, a baz object, and you say is instance of baz, when it gets from one module to the other, it will return false. Because the way the require works is that every file is required exactly once. The file is not executed until it has been required. But if there are two files that are the same exact module, you have two different instances entirely of that object.
You're not my baz. You're not my baz. You're the other baz.
Exactly.
Oh, that could be real fun to debug, I'm sure. So, yeah.
Well, there's a few cases, like the one that's actually common is with the MIME module. If you're using the MIME module in any of your sub modules or anything depends on MIME, go ahead and include it at the top level. Because with MIME, one of the common things you want to do is define a MIME type. So you're going to give it this extension and this MIME type. Like you might want to do it. I think they include the HTML5 app extension by default now, but they didn't used to.
And that's where it can bite you, is like, I required MIME. I set the MIME type. Why isn't it working? Because you're doing it too low.
Right. So I want to get into where and how people use Node, but I really want to answer another question really quickly, and that is just how do people get started with Node.js? I mean, what's the best way to get up and running, to get going? Do you just go download it somewhere? I'm asking this question having already done it, but I know that you can explain it better than I can.
Well, now it's super easy. You go to nodejs.org, you click the download button. They've got a PKG for Mac. They've got an EXE for Windows. And with Linux, if you're using Arch or something, you might have it in your repository. Otherwise, you probably want to compile from source, because I don't think the latest Ubuntu has a good version of Node. I mean, you should be using 0.6.
Okay. And then the other question I have is how do you find the modules that you need with NPM? Is there a search function in there? Or?
There is.
A search. It's super slow, though.
So do you go to npm.org?
You're saying, like, I kind of know the name, and you can do it on npm.org too. I think he uses the same backend, so it's kind of slow still. But are you saying like discover modules? So like I need to use an HTTP module or some URL request thing. I don't know. Like, which one should I use?
Yeah. So let's say that I'm super new to Node.js, and I've never heard of socket.io. And somebody's telling me you need Node.js so that you can do WebSockets. So how do I go about finding that library? Do I just do an npm search, socket, WebSocket?
I would suggest first Google it, because most of the time you're going to get like 3 results. And those results may not entirely be accurate because of Google's new algorithms. They're not maybe as good as the old ones.
It has to come up somewhere, right? We're not always happy with what they did. Okay, anyway, keep going. Sorry.
So if you look at the top 5 results on Google, one of them is probably going to be it. The way that is best to decide is probably, because they're all going to be listed on GitHub. So you check the number of forks, the last commit, and the number of watchers. And the one that has the highest watchers may not actually be the current maintained version, because sometimes one person starts a library, another person picks it up to maintain it. So if you click on the forks, you'll see like, oh, look, this fork stopped 2 years ago. And I don't even know how that's possible with Node, but I'm pretty sure I've seen it. And then you'll see another line of fork that doesn't have as many watchers, but it's got like 60 commits on it, and it pulls in from all the other branches. That's the current one you should be using.
Okay.
So as far as just discovering, if you have no idea, the Node IRC channel on Freenode is really good too. Lots of the like big Node guys hang out there, and then there's tons of friendly people too.
Is that pound Node on Freenode?
Yeah, I think it's pound Node.js. I have it saved, so I don't ever type it in. Let me check. But yeah. If you hop in there and just say, hey, I want to do X in Node, I want to send pictures of cats across the internet, then they'll tell you, oh, use Node cat.
Actually, isn't there a module for that? One of those artificial intelligence spam bot type things?
Maybe there will be. Are you talking about Qbot?
I don't know. I think there was one that will send links to pictures of cats in chat rooms for you.
Oh, yeah. I think that's Qbot. That's just a GitHub thing. They wrote a little bot. He's a friendly fellow.
Yeah, they actually use Qbot in their campfire chat as well.
Yeah.
And they use him to control all kinds of stuff. I actually did an interview with Tom Preston Werner for the Teach Me to Code podcast, and he talked about Qbot, and I was falling out of my chair laughing at some of the stuff they programmed it to do. But yeah, interesting. There are Ruby gems too that their sole purpose is to draw certain shapes or images on your screen. So
and those are the best gems. I love stuff like that.
Some of them aren't PG rated. So
shapes.
Yeah.
Thanks. So the channel is poundnode.js on Freenode.
Awesome.
And it's really friendly.
On my screen, when I search Node.js IRC, first hit, no longer maintained. So maybe those algorithms could be tweaked if any Google guys are listening.
I think you're supposed to downvote it or something.
You can't do that anymore. They got rid of that. Like when they were introducing Google Plus, they got rid of that.
Oh, that's right. You can only plus one them. Yeah, that's the other thing I think is interesting.
That means you're implicitly minus oneing the entire rest of the world that you don't plus one.
No, this is how you do it. Just open up Internet Explorer 6, download the Google toolbar, and then hit the search rank thumbs down button. That'll do it for you.
Do those APIs still work?
Last time I saw the Google toolbar, it still had it. That was probably a year ago, but who knows?
Yep. All right, so let's get into what people are using Node.js for. And this is really interesting to me because, there's been a bunch of back and forth between former Rubyists using Node and current Rubyists who have tried it out, saying it worked well for this, but not necessarily for that. So what are kind of the strengths and weaknesses? And I guess I'm probably aiming at specific modules within Node that provide like a web server and things like that.
So I think one immediate strength that it's really good at is real-time stuff, so push stuff. You can do that in other languages. I know probably every language has something to do with that, but with Node, it just feels really natural. So Socket.io is a great server for doing WebSocket communication, which lets you push stuff back and forth between the browser and the server.
It's kind of you can think of it as kind of like using the phone instead of IM. So you're not waiting for the message to get there, get processed, and get sent back. You actually have an open line where you can send messages both ways. At least that's my understanding.
It's really similar to TCP sockets. Well, not really similar. The basic idea is kind of similar, where you open a connection that both sides can read and write to and from. It's just over HTTP.
Right. And it has to be, I think, UTF-8.
Yeah, there are a few
binary
gotchas there. And I understand that some of the WebSocket stuff, and WebSocket kind of covers a couple of different technologies, but I guess there's some transparent proxies on the web that have messed up some of that stuff, depending on what you're using. So
that's been fixed.
Yay! That makes me happy.
I'm pretty sure that's been fixed. It's back in Firefox. I may be mistaken on this, but Firefox was committed to take out WebSockets until that was addressed, and now they're at like WebSocket version 13 or something.
Nice.
I just saw an HTTP header go by earlier today, and it had like WSV13 or something like that in it.
Oh, nice.
Sweet.
All right. Yeah, I was kind of hoping that they would solve the problem instead of just saying, well, there's nothing we can do. We got to work around it. So, but that's really cool. So, yeah, that's one area that I've heard a lot of good things about is the way that it handles sockets. One other thing, when you're talking about real-time stuff, the evented model makes a lot of sense to me when you're talking about things like a chat room or something where you get something in and you effectively want to generate events to manage it going back out.
Hex yeah.
So things like that make a lot of sense to me.
It's dirt simple to do that.
Oh my goodness. You can, if you want a prototype network code of any kind, UDP, TCP, HTTP, you cannot get something that is easier and faster to set up than Node.
Right.
Compile time excluded, depending on your system there.
Right. So,
not that it takes a compile, but there could be situations. Specifically, I had a really hard time getting it on an ARM board for this media box project I'm doing.
An ARM board?
Yeah. So I personally don't feel that Node is ready for ARM right now. I think if you're looking for something for ARM, you should probably go with a different language, maybe Python. Golang looks like it may have better support on ARM. At least my initial tests, it's more stable. Node.js is not as stable on ARM as it is on x86 for sure.
Works fine on legs, not on arms.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, that's the problem with doing it in the evening too. Is you get all my corny. Oh, that's clever, and then I say it. That's not very clever. Anyway. So
you're all used up.
Yeah. So
another thing about Node is I know that benchmarks are blah blah. Everyone's benchmark shows that their thing is the fastest, but Node really is.
It really is the fastest. It really is.
Really, I swear it is. It's really competitive speed wise among all the interpreted languages. And you can find different benchmarks that'll, depending on who points you to them, they'll probably show different things, but it's pretty blazingly fast. So
and that's another.
Go ahead.
That's another point is that JavaScript with Node became interesting because all the other implementations, as I understand it, were script interpretation. Node.js is not interpreting your script. You are compiling down to machine code. Now, it does that every time it runs, so the startup time is maybe a little bigger, but it's as far as I know, Python and Ruby don't compile down to machine code.
No. So basically what you're saying is every time I change my program, I have to restart my Node VM?
Yes.
Yeah, or have something that does magic for you. But
right.
Yeah.
So you can't say, oh, here's new code. Because that is one of the nice things about Ruby in particular, or
Definitely.
Python, is that it's like, okay, I've got new code. Here it is, interpret it, and it just goes on its merry way.
There is a trick that I've read about that relies on some undocumented black magic, where you go in and you delete the module from the module cache and then require it again with a different string somehow.
Interesting.
So there's also a module called Node Supervisor. It's by Isaacs, the chief guru of Node right now, and it's just a watcher. So every time you change your code and save it, it'll reload it.
That's cool.
But yeah, so you can get that.
Yeah. So some of the other paradigms on the web, mainly where basically I'm just making one call in and it's going to go fetch something out of the database and come back and say, here it is, and give me HTML. Is there really that big of a difference using something like Node over something else like Rails or Django or what have you?
You
So
get to pretend like you're way cooler than the other people.
That's true. And here's the classical counter question to that. You have a list of 100 items. Which sorting algorithm should you use to sort them?
Okay.
It doesn't matter.
Whichever one you can code fastest. It doesn't matter, right? I mean, if you're only doing one thing, well, who cares if Node's the fastest? You're not going to notice.
Right.
It's fun to program in. It's the expressiveness that it has is nice. Maybe not quite as nice as Ruby's, depending on your point of view and your flavor.
Mm-hmm.
But it's fun. I think that's one of the advantages of it.
Right. And
the
that's
callbacks.
So that's something else that Jameson kind of said that really I think is an important point to bring out, and that is he basically said it's competitive with the other languages. And I think that's really a valid point, is that when you come down to the benchmarks and you start looking at, okay, this one is faster than this one is faster than that one. But if they're all below that line of fast enough, then really, your advantage in running that language really comes down to how quickly or enjoyably you can code it up is what AJ's saying, and I think that really is a valid point. So whether it is in something like Node.js or in Ruby or in Python or in .NET, GAGME, or in Java, whatever, if that's your cup of tea, if that's what really gets it done for you, then yeah, what difference does it really make? But when you have these other instances where the paradigm of the language really matches up with the paradigm for the problem, I really like the idea of having something that's like, yeah, you just trigger these events and it goes and does its thing and it's done.
So I'd like to bring up a case where I don't think Node is appropriate.
Thank you.
But I like to do it anyway.
Okay.
Node is not appropriate for system scripts. And I feel like a gun pointed at the back of my head. I'm looking around here, make sure none of the people on the Node list are hearing me. But
the lynch mob will find you next week.
If you're doing really small stuff and it doesn't matter, then it still doesn't matter, right? But here's some downsides to Node. Startup time is perhaps longer than you want. So I personally, to me, the startup time feels a little slow. And again, I've got this personal hobby project on the ARM, and it so to me, I want it to be faster. When you're using x86, it's probably plenty fast enough. Mm-hmm. And a lot of stuff we do here at work, we do some web applications for like office stuff and whatever. And it's not a problem in any of those situations. But I was writing a script to transfer basically a terabyte of data almost from one hard drive to another and indexing it as I go. And I'd written that with Node.js. And the performance is terrible because all the callbacks end up hitting the CPU, and it's just like the asynchronous works against you in that case. Right. I would have been much better off to do it in Go or Python.
Right, but that's more or less a synchronous process anyway, right?
Yeah, but I mean, the thing is, I know Node a lot better than anything else right now. And so when I want to solve a problem, it's like, oh, do I learn how to do this in something else? Or do I just go ahead and do it right now in Node?
Every problem looks like a problem that is solved by Node. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. And I like JSON, and I like how it's, a perfect match. I mean, and most languages are a pretty perfect match with JSON these days. I mean, they all kind of go together really well, but yeah, I just noticed that it's not good for that application if that type of performance is important to you.
Right.
Because if you're doing lots of asynchronous calls, but you're doing it on something that could be done synchronous, you just lose efficiency, and it takes maybe longer.
Right. That makes sense.
So to kind of summarize, we've said that Node is awesome for low-level networking stuff, right?
Love it. Oh my goodness.
For like push real-time stuff, especially WebSockets, and for writing shell scripts.
Well, another problem with the system scripts is the way that integers work in Node is absolutely horrendous. And that's not Node, that's JavaScript. I mean, that's the spec. Like the spec is myrtleate all numbers.
Yeah.
Myrtleate, is that in Wikipedia?
I'm pretty sure.
Now, I want to talk about another part that comes up when people talk about the benefits of Node, which is reuse of code between the browser and the server. How do you guys feel about that?
Love it.
We kind of had this discussion a little bit before. I think there are definitely instances where that can occur, but I also think that it's not a complete panacea. It's not something that just always works all the time with all code. And so if you can make that work, great. If you can't, I just don't think, I think it's still a little bit of a pipe dream. And I think Yehuda and Joaquim kind of hashed that out. But I'm kind of siding with them at this point. I would really love to see it happen, but I don't think it's something that happen, that happens all the time under all circumstances. And I don't know if you necessarily always want it to either. So
I know AJ is a big proponent of this. So
yeah,
I want to hear him rant a little bit.
Well, this is my thing is, first of all, people need to use the MVC pattern, or whatever you want to call it, whatever the hipsters are saying these days. I mean, it's all the same thing. We rehash it. We call it different names. MVC is what I'm going to call it right now. Quit putting your daggone logic and your interface to the data in the same package. Get a function there, pass in the data, do your stuff, get the data out. Because as long as everybody's still in this mentality of writing 12,000 line long JavaScript files, which some of those are, in NPM, maybe not 12,000, but maybe, I don't know. I mean, the heck along, right? Stop doing it. Cut it down into chunks, because then you have stuff that's actually modular that you can publish. I think if you can't separate your code into something that can work in the browser, then you're doing it wrong. And same thing, vice versa. If your browser code, you can't run your core modules in Node, you're doing it wrong. You need to stop using window. You need to stop using this as a global. You need to stop making these expectations of ignoring the difference between what your algorithm is, or your process, your business process, and where your data is coming from. That they need to be separate. If you separate them, it'll work just fine.
All right. Well, I think that's also an interesting point, is the separation of concerns, and then you really can design pieces to work together that way. I think. Okay, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead, Joe. I was just going to say, it can sometimes feel like it's more work than it. Lots of times it feels like it's just for convenience. Like, I don't want to have to type two different things if I'm doing something that's vaguely similar on the browser and the server. But you do different things lots of times, and some of the code will work fine out of the box. But like, I'm a little suspicious of these frameworks that are trying to be full stack. Mm-hmm. Like Node frameworks that also have shared code with the browser. So your models on the server are exactly the same as your models in the browser.
Well, I'm suspicious of frameworks that don't do it.
Well, I tend to side a little more with Jameson. I honestly think that there are definitely going to be some areas where you can have that overlap. But at the same time, I really feel like, I mean, the paradigm in the browser and the paradigm on the server, I mean, you're solving different problems. And so I just...
Are you?
Well, in a lot of cases...
Well, if you abstract it enough, I guess all problems are the same problem. But.
Right. but where is the line where it's actually worth it? And I guess that's where we're having the discussion, right?
This is what I'm saying. Like, in the browser, your interface is...
You're talking about like strict mode stuff, basically, right? Like, don't do stupid stuff that won't run in strict mode, kind of.
Well, yeah, if you do strict mode, and a lot of people have the misconception, I recently found out a lot of people think that strict mode and JSLint go together. They don't. Like, your code doesn't have to pass JSLint to run in strict mode. You don't have to do all those crazy things. So, like, because some people have said, well, I can't use strict mode because I have to do this and my code won't pass JSLint when I do that, so I don't use JSLint. And they're not related. So I just want to throw that out there. But yes, there are a lot of things that strict mode will not allow you to do dumb things, like use this as the global. And so if you're using strict mode, then you do get the added benefit of more of your code just automatically works between the browser and Node.
Okay. I'm going to can of worms this right here. And what we're going to do is maybe next week we can get in and we can all go do some homework on this and see what's out there, see what, maybe have a little bit of discussion on the mailing list. And, let's next week, let's just talk about this. Let's really go into, okay, do we really think that it's feasible and that it makes sense to have code that runs in both places, and how much? And let's really do it. I mean, let's hash it out. Let's have a fight and exercise to the listener. If you have an opinion on this, we really want to hear it. So leave a comment on the blog, javascriptjabber.com, or just email one of us and just let us know. Or you can pick a fight with us on Twitter, but I have a funny feeling that 140 characters isn't going to do it justice. So I recommend
140 characters is enough to make a fool of myself. That's what I found out whenever I try and have complex discussions on Twitter.
I've started
I can say just enough that everyone thinks I'm stupid, and then I can't say anymore.
I've started enough fights on Twitter to where, you get into it, and by the time you're done, you realize that depending on how you read the different tweets, you pretty much just talked your way in a circle because you couldn't complete one thought between 4 tweets. So...
yeah.
Anyway, but we need to get into the picks. I hate to cut this off, but
just one last thing.
Okay.
I would say that we are nearing the tipping point because there are at least 4 different package managers that manage packages through NPM that are meant for both the browser and Node. Just want to throw that out there. So maybe we're not there yet, but I do think we're at the tipping point.
Could be. Very well could be. I think it is really an interesting place to go because I don't think there are any other languages that run in both places. So really, really fascinating thing. I mean, you might be able to make the case for Dart or something, but I mean that's only in like Dart Chromium or Chromium Dart or whatever the heck, Dartium I think it was called. So, but and that may be another interesting discussion to have with those guys another time. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of a uniquely positioned language that has this interesting interplay that we may be able to take advantage of. So anyway, with that, we'll get into the picks. Awesome. Yep. Jameson, what are your picks?
I have a few picks. It was my birthday last week, so I've got some sweet presents that I really enjoyed.
You going to make us feel old, or are you going to not tell us how old you are?
I'm not going to tell you because... Okay. Just because I got a really cool pair of socks, and they're from this place called happysocks.com. They're very colorful, but manly colorful, kind of. So I don't know. I guess you can get colorful socks by going to like the women's section of Kohl's, and they'll have little pink flowers on them and stuff. But these are like kind of not flamboyant, just like expressive, but in a way that doesn't threaten my sense of manliness. I really like my socks. My next pick is a TV show. We talked about TV shows last time when we had Joe on, and it reminded me of this one. This is the only TV show that I actually have ever in my life watched as it has come out. It's called Justified. It's on FX, and it's kind of like a modern day cowboy show. It's got Timothy Oliphant is the lead guy. I think he's from Deadwood, the HBO put on, and a couple other things, but it's really cool. He is kind of like Clint Eastwood, and Clint Eastwood is the man. So it just kind of reminds me of that super cool cowboy type thing. And then my other pick is the Kindle. I got a Kindle for my birthday and I love it. I was skeptical of them for a while. But Chuck and I were talking about it, and it's pretty amazing how much of a difference the specialized screen makes for reading outside and just for reading everywhere. It's just a lot more comfortable than reading on a computer screen or an iPad. So I've read a lot more since I got it, which makes me happy because I love books. I love to read.
Yeah, one other nice thing about it is that you don't have to prop it open like you do a regular paper book. Because I've been reading some books that I actually own in hard copy, and the more I get into it, the more I'm sitting there going, I really wish I just had this on my Kindle because it's so convenient. It's light. I used to read books on my iPad. I mentioned this in the pre-show, but I used to read books on my iPad, and I didn't realize what a difference it made just from having the iPad backlit and having the Kindle not. But it's way easier on your eyes to read. But the other thing is that the iPad weighs at least 3 times as much as the Kindle, and so to prop it up was just it was a pain. Now, one thing that I do want to point out with the Kindle that is a little bit of an issue that I found is that I've had people send me their ebooks in PDF, and if you're trying to read a PDF on your Kindle, you can only scale it because it's an image, so you can only scale it you can scale everything. You can't just scale the text, which is something that you can do with the Kindle formatted books. And so if you're reading a PDF, you may wind up reading that on your computer or your iPad. But just about anything else, and if they put it out in a Mobi format, which is an open source format that the Kindle will read, or anything else, oh man, it's so nice.
I'm pretty sure the Kindle format is a modified, didn't it kind of fork off of Mobi?
Yes, their official version is not open source. It's an ABZ or ABC or something. But yeah, it's like a specialized, I think it's a specialized encrypted, compressed version of a Mobi, but I don't know exactly how that works. But anyway,
I have one last pick. I forgot. I got these awesome headphones. They're called Grado SR60 headphones. So I'm not much of an audio buff, but I asked a friend who was, what are some good headphones that are really high quality for not a crazy amount of money? Because headphones can get pretty insanely expensive when you get up into the territory where people think that you need like gold-plated cables, and I don't know. You can spend a lot of money on headphones. But these were like $70 and they're amazing. They're so nice.
What was the model number again?
Them. It's SR60.
SR60. Okay.
Yep. So if you want nice headphones, they're open ear so other people can hear what you're listening to. If that's a problem, then probably not for you. But if your music is so awesome that you just want to blast it to everyone, like those people that put huge stereos in their cars and crank it really loud, then you can do that with these headphones too. Just share how cool you are with the whole world.
Yeah.
So them's my picks.
I love those people. They have it so loud that you can hear the windows rattling.
They're not enjoying it. Yeah, no one can be like, yeah, I love this song. I can't feel my face because it's so loud. This is nice.
Right. You hear the windows rattling and that's about it. It's like, that is awesome music if I could tell what it was.
Yeah,
anyway.
It's just like a robot exploding, it sounds like.
Yeah, but then you also have these people that go to these contests and try and like max out their sound systems to get the most decibels out of it. I think those are kind of cool, actually, because they're like engineering feat, but yeah, not practical for day-to-day use.
Nope, but these headphones are because they're cool.
Cool. AJ, what are your picks?
So I also have some pretty nice headphones, but I'm not going to pick those this week. I'm going to pick Nintendo because they make games that are mostly family friendly and just fun to play with people. So I got a Wii kind of on a whim. Well, not kind of, exactly on a whim last week. And I got
That's
it
old technology, man.
Well, it's all right. It was cheap. Well, comparatively,
Hey, the
right?
coming out. That's pretty cool.
I think one might be causal to the other.
But so it came with the games that I wanted. It came with Mario Kart and Smash Bros. And Super Mario, which are basically the only games that you need to enjoy the Wii or, any of the Nintendo game systems. You buy them over and over again. Mm-hmm. They used to have Top Gear in there too, but then they really screwed it up on the 64 and it never became popular again. Anyway, so it came with those games and it's just been really fun playing it with people. And believe it or not, video games help me to be more social because that means I'm not programming.
Yay for social.
Yeah, I told somebody that I was getting the Wii so that I'd be more social and they gave me this weird look.
No, the Wii it's totally the most social of the consoles.
Yeah.
Because I don't know, it's not a ton of fun by yourself, but it's so much fun with other people.
Yeah, we have one, and I have to say we do play it and it's fun. So
I have to get the GameCube controllers for it because
playing Smash Bros. On the Wii with the nunchuck and stuff is not possible because they multiplex so many of the buttons. Like my favorite move, I cannot figure out how to do it because it requires like pressing 2 buttons and over, and then on the other controller, the A button, like all at like with perfect synchronicity. Whereas on the GameCube controller, it's just like Z over an A, and it works every time. So I'm losing because I can't fight.
Right.
It's fun.
Poor craftsman who blames his tools, AJ. I think you need to train.
Awesome.
Just kidding.
Okay.
But yeah,
anything else? Okay. I've got about 4 games to list here. Mario Brothers. Anyway. So my picks are kind of going to be all over the place. One thing that I just discovered here for some of the stuff that I'm working on is a program called Things. You can get it in the Mac App Store. Or
I think I've heard of it.
You fortunate people who have a Mac. Basically, it's a to-do list, except it's like hyped up. It's got all this other extra stuff in it that it just makes my life better. Did I pick it last time? I didn't think I had. I was looking at the list. 7, 8. Nope, I didn't.
False alarm.
I did pick it on Ruby Rogues. That might be what you're thinking of.
Oh, that's what it was.
But yeah.
Can't get enough of Chuck.
Yeah, I don't know. I never can tell like how much crossover I should do with my picks, but I have to say I'm really loving it. It lets you set up recurring tasks. You can sandbox, or not sandbox, but you can categorize them. You can also put them under a specific like life role or area of responsibility. And so then you can kind of, break things down however you need to. Mark stuff off and really just, okay, I need to get this done today. I need to get this done this week. And just really, really handy. One other that I've been using for a while, and I just found their Mac app, is Harvest. And this is related more to freelancing, but it's what I use to track all my hours and to invoice my clients. And I also have my subcontractors use it to track their hours so that I can invoice my clients for their work. And it's worked really, really well, and I love it. I really, really love it. One last pick that I have, and I kind of hesitate to pick this because it's sort of exclusive. It's called the Podcast Mastermind. You can find it at thepodcastmastermind.com. And basically it's, how do I explain it? So it's a group of podcasters that it was put together by Cliff Ravenscraft over at podcastanswerman.com, which I highly recommend if you're thinking about starting a podcast. Go check out that show. But anyway, what it is so he decided that he wanted to create this mind share about podcasting, and it goes well beyond that. I mean, it gets it. We talk about life, so we talk about like weight loss and family and all of these other things. So it really is a true mastermind in the sense that you get from whichever book invented the term mastermind. I don't remember which one it was. It was The Millionaire Mind or Think and Grow Rich or one of those. But anyway, so it's just a place and time where we can get together and talk about what's going on and give each other feedback. Explain, okay, this is what I've got going on, and then I get a lot of positive feedback for that. But it's just been an incredible resource, not just in the realm of podcasting, but personally for me, I've made some friends and really have gotten some valuable feedback from them. And so if you're looking at getting into podcasting and you're willing to, spend the monthly fee to be involved, then go check it out at thepodcastmastermind.com. But what I would recommend first is go listen to podcastanswerman.com. Go listen to the podcast there and really kind of get a feel for what's going on. Try and start a podcast and then just really get a good handle on what you're working on there. So anyway, those are my picks, and that's about all I have. I do want to let everybody know that we're working hard to get these shows out as soon as we can. My goal is we recorded this on Tuesday, and it looks like we're going to have a set time to record these on Tuesdays. So hopefully you'll get them by Thursday or Friday at the very latest. But my goal is to have all of my podcasts for the week out by Friday. So look for it then. And then if you listen to these over the weekend or something, it's there. And, if you pick it up and listen to it throughout the next week on your commute or anything, then that should work for you too. But anyway, if you have feedback as far as when you want it to come out or anything like that, let us know. You can email me, chuck@teachmetocode.com, and I'm pretty open to getting those emails and answering them as I get them. So, I definitely value your feedback and things. I'm also working on a few other things with my podcasts in general, and so keep an ear out for that because I will probably bring it up next week. Other than that, we are also talking about doing a book club. So if you have a book recommendation for us, then again, email us and let us know, or tweet it to @JSJabber on Twitter. And with that, we're in iTunes. Check us out, leave us a review, and thanks for listening.
See ya.
Good night. Thank you. Come again.
And there go all of our listeners.